Welcome to the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast. Tune in every Thursday as we share inspirational stories from the world's greatest creators, entrepreneurs, and go-getters about how they've turned life's lemons into lemonade. And now, here's your host of Lemonade Stand Stories, Charan Prabhakar.
What is going on, guys? This is Charan Prabhakar with the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast, and today I am here with a dear friend of mine, Kim Whatcott, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for not even that long of a time, to tell you the truth. But yet she has inspired me so much with her creative brain power. And a lot of times when we have great conversations, she's always giving me something to think about, which is so awesome and so cool. And it's an intriguing perspective. Recently, MBA student, right? Just graduated from BYU, if that's correct. And you were studying speech pathology, or you were working on speech pathology, correct?
Well, yeah. So before I went to the MBA program.
Before you went to the MBA program, you were a speech pathologist.
Yeah, try to say that 5 times fast.
I need a speech pathologist just to help me say those words.
We do that on purpose.
Which is, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. But no, I was always very, very impressed with you and the conversations. And I know you love to travel and to see the world and to do different things. And there was when we were having some of these conversations, we were having a discussion about finding your voice. Right? Finding your voice. And it just kept getting me thinking. And I'm like, you know what? I want you on the podcast. And now you're not our typical guests, who are they may have started a business for a long time, or they may have been an actor or a producer or whatnot. You're still trying to find your voice. You're still trying to find your path, but yet you have incredible insights. And I kept thinking, yeah, Kim needs to be on this podcast. So thank you. Thank you so much for spending the time and for coming out here and joining me on this adventure that we're going to be having very, very soon. So how you doing, first off?
Good. Yeah, doing well.
That's awesome. So you grew up in Washington.
That's right.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you came out to Utah.
Yes.
A little bit ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how long ago did you come to Utah?
I came to Utah for the program, so about 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Were you in Washington just before working?
Oh, heavens, no.
Okay. All right. Because you were traveling the world, or you traveled all over the place, right?
Yeah. I lived pretty much everywhere, I guess, west of the Mississippi between the time I graduated and now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were some of your favorite spots that you went and saw?
And I don't know, saw versus lived.
Okay.
I've loved everywhere I've lived. I don't know if I'd go back to any of them because I just love trying new things.
Yeah.
But I mean, I lived in a small town, Yakima, Washington. I lived in downtown Dallas. I lived in Denver.
Yeah.
So just a lot of different perspectives.
And I feel different perspectives, different energies of all those places.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? And it's cool. We both were discussing this. We're both the oldest in our families.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I love being independent. I love trying new things, having new life experiences. For me, being in one place for too long would drive me insane.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always kind of out and about and traveling and exploring and doing different things. And it sounds like you're doing something very similar as well in your own path. What was it about traveling that excited you the most?
I think being able to see different perspectives and different ways of life, how people
Mm-hmm.
live. I mean, there's a lot of commonalities, obviously, between people in different countries, but there's a lot of differences too. And I think just experiencing different cultures, different food, different smells, different ways of life has been something I've really enjoyed.
There's something about having such a rich perspective from going and traveling all those different places, right? And I find it very interesting to do something like that, because when you have such a kind of a monotone way of life, not that that's bad, there's different people have different perspectives with even just that.
Sure.
But I do find that having the perspective of living in a high speed city versus a small ranch, you have a different mindset and a different life experience altogether,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how would you say your own life has been enriched just by all of those experiences?
Oh, that's a good question. I think maybe being able to connect with different types of people. And I don't know if that's something that I was born with or have kind of developed through these experiences. But just being really adaptable. Again, if I had to choose where I'd want to live, I don't know. I have this gypsy spirit that wants to try on a bunch of different things. And I love meeting just a variety of different people. So just maybe being able to be comfortable in a variety of situations.
Did you ever feel like you were ever shy growing up, or were you always I love meeting people and I love traveling?
It's funny. I was super outgoing as a little kid. I kind of had this shy phase in junior high school, and then came full circle. And so I think that just awkward teenage phase probably was.
Oh man, that awkward teenage phase. I'm still kind of going through it, but no, I know like that. I remember like 7th grade, 8th grade, like those were kind of like rough years trying to figure out what the heck you're doing. And then when I got to high school, I definitely felt like, okay, I think I'm kind of getting a little bit more of a sense of who I am and trying to find my voice. And you know, I'm kind of like reiterating this whole thing, but like I think finding your voice is so important. I feel like a lot of people, because they haven't really found who they are, like their voice, like how they approach the world and what offering they're going to give to the world, they tend to kind of wander around a little lost, right? They're always in that exploratory, like, but never like really finding what they really want to do. So I want to talk a little bit about speech pathology and then kind of go into finding your voice. And literally you're helping people find their voice with speech pathology. So I want to first talk, like, how did you even get involved in that to begin with? Like what drew you to that field?
Sure. I've always thought the human body is fascinating. I remember doing an anatomy class and it's just like so sacred to see how intricate the body is. So I always was drawn to kind of the medical field. But I don't know. I wanted something where I could kind of mirror that with education, and speech pathology was like a perfect blend of all of it. And I loved grad school, loved learning. And just the more I learned, the more I wanted to do it. What was
it like, just like getting into that field? Like, did you feel like it was a little nervous? Was it more than what you expected, or what was your day-to-day like, I guess?
Sure. It ended up being so I went in, I worked in the schools before doing reading intervention. So I figured that was something I would continue doing, just more in the speech pathology level. But I went, as I was in school, really loved the medical, like the hospital. And so the speech pathology or the speech therapy that I did, I mean, I had an experience in a variety of settings, but it was primarily really acute care. So someone who's just had a stroke, who's just had a brain injury, someone who's on a ventilator and can't breathe, or even like in the NICU, and everyone's like, well, babies can't talk, but we do a lot with swallowing as well. And even though babies can't speak words, there's still a lot of communication cues that they're giving. So things like, this bottle is too fast for me, like we need to switch it up, or I'm not quite ready for that, or so just being able to facilitate that communication was really cool.
Did you ever find that, like, okay, so you have babies that are growing up and, you know, of course, they're trying to learn how to like communicate, of course, but adults that have maybe had brain like damage or something like that, and they've forgotten certain things, or they've forgotten how to like actually communicate, did they feel like really, really frustrated?
Oh yeah.
Right?
And I think that's something I wasn't prepared for, honestly, going in, and maybe one of the reasons why I kind of transitioned to business. There's a huge emotional toll of someone. You'd have someone who's incredibly successful, articulate, running companies, and then the next day they like can't even say their own name. And it's so frustrating. So the highs are really high and the lows are really low.
Right. How did you help those that were like emotionally so low? Because I can only imagine, for me, like, I love my life. I love going and doing all kinds of fun things, but man, if I couldn't speak anymore, or if I had like such hard thing, like things that were so obviously easy for me maybe the day before, but because of some freak accident, I can't do that anymore. Like, that would be so difficult for me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How did you help like some of those people like kind of alleviate some of those emotional burdens as they were kind of finding their voice?
I don't know. I think it really takes a village, honestly. So especially when you're in the hospital, you have therapists, you have physicians, and then the family or the caregivers are a huge piece of it too. I don't know. I think a lot of times I honestly felt so inadequate in that particular setting, just because like there's sometimes not a lot that you can do besides maybe just bringing a little bit of light or encouragement, which often didn't feel like enough. But I mean, sometimes I would just think, you know, if every person who's coming into this room is just bringing a little bit of joy or a little bit of light, maybe that can have an impact.
I love that. I mean, honestly, it's so interesting. This is not even anything related to this, but I often think about this. I used to teach snowboarding, and in snowboarding, like you have certain goals like you want them to accomplish by the end of the lesson. But for whatever reason, some people just aren't either coordinated enough, or they're terrified, or whatever it is. But then even though those were the goals, the external goals, I think that the internal goals were always like, hey, I just want you to have a good time. You know, I just want you to have a little bit of light. It doesn't really, I mean, if you can get this, like, great, let's get this, you know, and that's always what we want to shoot for.
Right.
But I don't ever want people to feel like they're a failure.
Yeah. Right.
And I want people to like have a 2-hour lesson with me and then leave being like, wow, that was a really good time. And I you know, there's smiles all around, and it's like, oh, it's great. It's fantastic. Right. And I always said like that was a really positive thing. But yeah, like you have so much light already that you offer people. So I hope you don't ever like discount what you were able to provide for people, even though you don't feel like it was completely adequate, because yeah, I can imagine them like struggling so much, you know?
Well, and I think something else too that came to mind is a lot of the work that we do, especially in rehab or teaching people to speak again is compensatory strategies. So maybe you'll never be able to actually speak the way you used to before, but you can still write, or we have like different devices. And again, it's such a different mindset and it's a different way. But and I think you could apply that to just in your broad life as well. Like you may not have you may have an expectation for how you want to be or how you want your voice to be, but maybe just being open to like different ways of communication. That sounds very abstract and ethereal, but
no. I think it's awesome. It's like, look, you're providing tools for people to have life experience a different way,
right? And
that's all it really is, right?
Yeah.
And you can still find joy in that, even though the outcomes look a little bit different than what they used to, right? I imagine it's the same thing could happen to someone who lost a limb or something like that. It's like, yes, your life experience is going to be different, but that doesn't mean you can't have joy.
Right.
You can still have plenty of joy, but you may have to reframe things, right? And like look at things like a little bit different to find the same type of thing that you had before.
Yeah.
I remember I have a buddy of mine who has a daughter with spinal bifida. Okay. And it was actually kind of funny because she's probably like, I don't know, 7 years old, 8 years old, and you know, having some recognitions that she is not like everybody else.
Yeah. And
she lives kind of paralyzed, like in a wheelchair her whole life. And that's all she's going to be able to do. And so one day, she's in the car and her parents are sitting in the car and they weren't going anywhere. And then she says, "Hey, Dad, what does disabled mean?" And he's like, "Oh, shoot." And then like, he's, you know, like looking at his wife and she's like, "Okay, honey, like, we've been preparing for this. Yeah. It's time. You gotta like talk, you know?" And so he gives like this beautiful speech and saying, listen, being disabled means maybe you're not able to do something some way, but you're definitely able to do things another way. It's just a different way of looking at things, you know? So you may not be able to run and all that stuff, but you can definitely like think really quickly and come up with different things. And like, you know, you can like control your wheelchair in a cool way that other people aren't gonna have the opportunity to do. And so it's like this beautiful thing, right? And then his wife was like, that was good job, honey, you know, and everything. And he's like, yeah, he's like, does that make sense? And then she like looks at him from the back of the car. She's like, okay. And then she's like, pulls her phone out. She's like, oh, because my phone says it's disabled.
Oh.
And he's like, oh my gosh. And then they realize like, oh, okay, she wasn't paying attention to any of that stuff at all, you know? And she just ended up being a happy girl anyway. But it was like such a cool, funny, hilarious moment where I'm like, oh, well, I guess it turns out that she had no clue about any of that stuff. But I always remember thinking like, perspective, I feel, is everything when it comes to stuff like that, right? Yeah. Now we talk about finding people's voices, and I don't necessarily mean like how they necessarily speak, but just like they're offering to the world, right? And when someone who has had speech their whole life and they may have been very successful suddenly have that not be an option in their life anymore, how do they find their voice?
Ooh, and okay, well, to preface this, I usually saw people just in the acute stage, so when they're in the ICU. So sometimes, or most of the time, I didn't get to see the end of the story. And I think a lot of times maybe finding their voice came down the line. And maybe it's a little bit what we were talking about before, is realizing this is something that I can't do anymore, but here are some other strengths that maybe I didn't know I had, or ways to contribute I didn't know I had. Something I thought was really beautiful too is those patients who would return or look for ways to support other people that were in similar situations. I worked with a lot of patients who have head and neck cancer, so they'll have their voice box removed and have an artificial larynx or voice box. And so there's a big community for that, and just what it's like to go through that struggle. And something I wish we did a little differently, honestly, was prepare people for what that would be like post-surgery. And there isn't always a lot of education around that. But I think the sooner you can join that community and understand what that journey is like, there's a lot of connection there.
So describe that for me. Like, so someone has neck cancer and they have their voice box removed and a new voice box is put in. Can they still speak, or does it sound different? Or what does it
and it's
sound
not
like?
even necessarily like a new voice box. It's like a prosthesis.
Okay.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds different. I think of I guess now I was thinking of Top Gun.
Yeah,
the new one that came out.
Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a prosthesis yet, but it's kind of a similar. I mean, that's I think maybe the most accessible way to look at it, where they often will have to use like pen and paper to write, or it just is a totally different lifestyle.
Yeah, it really is, right? And it's so interesting how, I mean, you mentioned how the human body is so beautiful and intricate and amazing, and we so often take it for granted.
Yeah.
We really do. And then when something like this happens, you're like, whoa, how do I function? How do I move forward? What do I need to do? What's the process for healing when everything has changed? The rules of the game have changed, right? Have you ever experienced something like that in your own life where like the rules of the game have changed? It could be with finding your own voice, or it could be, I don't know, things in your own like life with relationships or family or something have changed.
I don't know. I need to noodle on that, but this sounds so cheesy. Like I'm sure I have.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever like really stopped to think about it. Like
yeah.
I just kind of make up my own rules.
Well, I think that's awesome. The thing is like you have like the traditional path, right? And for me, I'm kind of like that too. You kind of make your own rules up as you go, right? Mm-hmm. And as you do, it's kind of like that ability to stay flexible, I think, is like key for a lot of that stuff.
Okay, I think I have one.
Okay, yeah. Tell me, yeah.
So I grew up, love my family, have a wonderful, beautiful family.
Yes.
But I grew up in kind of a conservative community where as a woman, typically you stayed home and raised a family. Like that was your role. Mm-hmm. And if you worked, it was because you needed to support the family financially, or like you could be a nurse, you could be a teacher, you could be a secretary. Like that was just kind of the way
that was it.
I grew up all the way through undergrad. And then I graduated and realized like, oh,
there's way more options.
Wait a minute. Yeah. No, I was kind of panicked because I was like, oh, I don't have a husband or kids. Like what am I supposed to be doing with my life? And I think that's honestly been a journey that I've been on for several years. And even coming out of speech pathology and into business school, like I never thought that would be an option for me. Mm-hmm. But realizing that, I didn't have like the traditional path there, but there was still a lot that I could learn and add to that arena.
It's so interesting because I feel like so many of us have like, kind of going back to the whole finding your voice situation, right? I grew up in a household where it's like, you got to be a doctor, and you got to be a lawyer, you got to be like, you got to own a certain business or certain thing. And there's certain expectations that's like required of me being from Indian parents and all that stuff. Because a lot of the other, like my parents' friends, their kids all do that. Mm-hmm. And so one thing that's been like a real challenge for me or like my family is just like the fact that my brother and I, we don't do those things.
Right.
I work as an actor. My brother's like a musician, and we don't make like an insane amount of money like some of those other people do. And so it's been really a hard thing for my dad to grapple with. And it was also like one of those situations where I was like, yeah, I guess I should. But then I realized something. Who made those rules up?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like who made those rules up that we had to adhere to? Mm-hmm. And I think it's sometimes those narratives that have stopped me from discovering who I really am. Right?
Right.
I remember this was like, oh gosh, when was it? Like Christmas time years ago. I was walking around Target, just going to pick up something. And I suddenly like looked at people's eyes, and I felt like they were just almost dead inside. They looked so tired. They looked exhausted. They were kind of like going through the motions. They were just like, okay, yep, I guess we got to go pick this up and whatever it was. And I'm like, whoa, these people don't have life in them. And I think that is what really like struck me as alarming. Mm-hmm. How many people live their lives without actually life in them? Mm-hmm. But when I look at you, I'm like, whoa, there's someone that really has life in her, you know, even though you haven't discovered everything yet and you're still trying to figure your path out. What have you done in your own life to make sure that you always have life in you?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is doing things. It sounds like everything I say sounds so cliche.
No,
my own
good.
voice, and I'm gonna quote everything else. But is doing things that scare you every day.
Okay, I love that.
Or like at least once a week. So I don't know. I feel like sometimes I have this like tearing inside me, like part of me wants to be just so comfortable and like this like is it Bilbo Baggins? Is that the one who wants to stay in his house? And then there's a part of me like totally wants to adventure, and they're always at war. But I think just pushing myself to like get outside my comfort zone. So whether that's doing this dang podcast or like trying a new activity, new sports, like rock climbing, mountain biking, going to a different country, like just doing something that is uncomfortable, I think helps keep life exciting. And sometimes you find like passions and things you didn't even know you had. So I'd say that's something. Surrounding myself with people who also like really enjoy life is a big one. And then I think just like being grateful for even small things, like, wow, that sunset was incredible, or like this air smells amazing. That sounds so silly, but being from Washington, I have to just tell you, like, the air there is so beautiful. It smells so good. It's so fresh and so clean. And just like really experiencing like all the senses around you, because it can get so easy, and I can easily get caught up in like the day-to-day monotony and like tasks. But just to take a step back and realize like how incredible life is.
I love that so much, because you have such an exploring spirit, and that's like how I describe my spirit as well. Like, I love to explore. I just love it. We were talking in the car earlier about like camping and everything like that, and I just barely went on this awesome camping trip, and it was so cool because it took me, I don't know, like a tank of gas, not even a tank of gas to get there. And I went to a place that I've never even heard of before that was in my backyard, pretty much in Utah. I could just get there. And it was majestic and nobody was around. It was so silent. It was so beautiful. And the air also smelled great there.
There you go,
It was amazing. Like, I remember being like, whoa, I've not had this much oxygen into my brain in such a long time. It's incredible. But I remember thinking as I was doing that, wow, this is so refreshing and so alive, right? And it made me just kind of, I don't know, get super invigorated for life. So I'm all about it too. Like, I love doing things that scare you, but I just love the fact of just exploring, just trying new things and exploring new places and stuff, because every place you go, like, you create a new memory. And to me, memories are really what makes life rich. I remember there was a time, because I went to BYU as well. And when I was at BYU, I was so focused on getting good grades and being a good student. And I did. I got good grades. I was a good student. But I missed out on so much life. You know, like, I look back on my BYU days in my 20s and I'm like, I don't really remember those days that much. I really don't. But everything outside of it, when I went and explored with my friends and did this trip or did that trip or did this or whatever, I was like, whoa, I remember those memories. Those are so fun. And we have like random pictures all over the place. And I'm like, yeah, that was awesome. I loved every moment of that, you know? So I think it's just so great. I want to shift conversations just a little bit. Now, one of the things that we were talking about earlier was how, and I think we both kind of struggle with this, which is sometimes, you know, being the oldest, we sometimes feel this not desire, but it's almost like we almost feel like people depend on us. So it's almost like we need to be the ones that provide all the answers to people. And yet we ourselves struggle with certain answers and whatnot. How did you navigate that aspect of your life? And I'm assuming that might be with maybe family or with roommates or something, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, actually, this happened a lot in the medical field, obviously, because you come in, you're supposed to be the expert. But a lot of times, like, you don't have the answer, or maybe the answer isn't what everyone else wants to hear. So I think just doing the best with what you have, and sometimes just being on, like, there's a fine line between like presenting what you do know with confidence and also being willing to say, like, I don't know, but like, here's the best I can offer. I think in terms of my family, like, that's something I've worked on over the years, of just like having to let go of and letting someone else have their experience and their voice. And like, I guess I can tie that back in, is sometimes I think I had expectations for like how our family should be or how I want my siblings to be, or like, this worked for me, so like this will probably work for you. But like, no one wants that older sister or that person in their life that is constantly telling them what to do. I mean, like, if you ask for advice, that's one thing, but so just really like being willing to understand that like it's gonna look different for them, and that's okay. It's gonna look different for me, and that's okay. And giving other people the freedom to have their own voice.
You know, it's interesting because the older I've gotten, the more I realize, I don't think they wanted advice. They just want compassion and grace.
Honestly, and I think that's something I've learned. Like,
right.
Most people, or at least the people I've interacted with, like, they kind of already know the answers. Like, they just need someone to listen and like verbally process and help them get to it.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it's so interesting. My brother and I couldn't have, like, we were raised from the same parents, but we couldn't have had more different lives.
Yeah.
You know, and he's been on this podcast before, and we've talked about it as well. And I realize his path was exactly what he needed. Even though I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, that was intense. I guess I'm grateful that you took it because I know you're okay now, but that path was so dark and that was so heavy. Meanwhile, my path, I felt had a lot more like light and joy. But he is at the same spot now. And he said he had to go through everything that he went through. And even though he's like, you know, I do regret a lot of things that I had done.
Right.
I look back now and be like, I needed it. That's the path I needed to take. So for me, it's always been like, yeah, compassion, grace. Those are the things like right now that I'm like, yeah, I think that's because I have a tendency to want to fix things. I don't know if you have that personality or anything, but I definitely do. And be like, okay, let me see what I need to do to get rid of this situation or that situation. But it is interesting when you decide, hey, no. The best thing I can do is to do nothing at all, you know, and just kind of let them go through their thing and just be like, dude, I got you. You know, I'm here. Just give me a call if you need me.
Yeah.
Sometimes easier said than done, though. You know?
And I think, I don't know, now I'm going to get really abstract again too, but I think that can happen internally with ourselves as well. I think there are parts of like voices in me that sounds concerning, but I mean, like, I think it's okay to give space for like, sometimes you feel sad and that's all right. Or like, sometimes you're scared and that's okay. I remember I had a good friend the other day who she like went through a really tough breakup and was just kind of like off the radar for a week. And I was like, same thing. Like, what can I do? How can I fix this? Can I get you anything? Like, do you need to talk about it? And she's like, I just need to cry for a couple days and that'll be fine. And she totally was. And I was like, yeah, maybe sometimes we just need to give ourselves space. Yeah. And when you say like, how do you really live life? Like life is experiencing all of those
all the emotions, right? Yeah. Yeah. And do you experience a lot of sadness and grief?
I think periodically for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I do, but it's very periodically. I feel like
you're like the happiest person I know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, but the thing is, I wonder sometimes if it's healthy or not, because I'm like, but I genuinely feel happy. That's the thing. It's not like I'm trying to fake my happiness.
Sure.
But I find when I'm going through my own set of grief and sadness, I tend to isolate. I tend to just go by myself. I don't know if that's how you roll. Yeah. But I find that for me, if I'm going to go through like a sad period of time, I don't want to be around people. I'd rather just kind of be in my own room, in my own house, just kind of locked up for a little bit. And I don't feel like that's just how I've coped, you know, that's just kind of how I was raised and everything. And so that's just kind of, I'm the product of that, you know? Yeah. I was raised in a family where it wasn't really kosher, normal to express emotion. Yeah. And my brother did though, but his was more through anger. Right. But I just never, I had to be kind of stonewalled a little bit more serious and a little bit more like, okay, I'm going through something crappy, but I can tell that my family is going through their own intense struggles and I do not want to add more to their burden. Yeah. So I would like, hush, hush, keep it quiet. You know, I don't know if that's how you rolled, but that's how I did for sure. Yeah. You know, well, part of the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast is talking about people's lemonade stand stories. So that means that in order to have lemonade, you had to have lemons. Sure. Right. So was there ever a moment in your life where like, whoa, that was a lemon and we're going to swap it to lemonade? You know?
This is a great segue. And actually, so thank goodness our friend asked me these questions before so I could kind of think about it because sometimes it's hard for me to think about on the spot. And I wrestled with them a lot. Like, what is my lemon? What is my lemon in life? And I can't think of like one specific event, but I think for a lot of us in life, like it's sometimes like the chronic things, right? So like I will struggle. Like I have cycles with like anxiety and depression or like times when my body just kind of like shuts down a little bit. And that's really frustrating. And it doesn't, like, again, like it gets better, but it comes back. It's just like kind of this like cyclical thing. So being able to just manage that in a way that, like, again, you can still live life and still experience joy and still have incredible experiences, but also realize, like, sometimes there's just really crappy days. And I think especially, like, working in healthcare, again, with all of that emotion, or even in the MBA program when you have to be on all the time and like be extroverted and networking and like promoting yourself. And there's some days I'm like, I literally don't want to even, like, leave my bedroom, but I'm going to. So just kind of learning, how to manage that has probably been, that was the lemon that I was.
That's a good lemon.
Sort of thinking about.
Well, honestly, like, I feel like I'm similar. I mean, I could say, like, you know, for whatever reason, I've had a lot of people close to me pass away. Yeah. I could say that's a lemon, but truthfully, that's not been my lemon. That's a weird thing, you know? I mean, it is sad when people pass away, but, you know, I have like kind of a spiritual understanding, and that helps give me comfort. But I would say something very similar. Like, I feel like I'm a pretty happy person and all this stuff, but sometimes little things trigger me, you know? And I was having a conversation with a friend about this just the other day, but like, for whatever reason, I mean, not whatever reason, it makes sense, but I feel like, you know, I'm a positive person and stuff, but words can break me pretty quickly. Yeah. And if someone close to me, like, puts me down or cuts me down, I get knocked down. You know, I really do. I can't be like, oh, it's cool, it's whatever, you know, it hurts. And I know for sure, like, it hurts my confidence because I feel diminished. I feel like my voice is diminished, right? Yeah. And even if it's something simple, just knowing that there was judgment, it tends to rock my world. And I think it's because growing up, I felt a lot of judgment from parents and all that stuff for life choices and whatnot. And so even as an adult, being 41 and having some little thing happen, but knowing that it was like kind of a cynical response or something like that, it just knocks me out. And I have to, like, sometimes take like a couple of hours or even a day to be like, okay, my worth is not based on those words. They're going through their own struggles. And I have to, like, first logically explain to myself, like, everything's okay. But then I have to take some time emotionally to go through all that stuff, you know? And if I don't, then I go through the cyclical patterns of depression and anxiety and all that stuff. Yeah. How do you feel about that for yourself? Like, do you ever feel like words can kind of affect you? Yeah, definitely. Or I think maybe, like, harkening back to what you said before with emotion, like sometimes feeling a lack of voice. Like, I think that's something I experienced maybe growing up and still, like, or I give, like, more weight to what other people say. And that's something I really have had to, like, look at lately is, I mean, it's important to, like, be considerate of what other people are saying, but sometimes, like, that's not always true for you. And anyways, so just keeping that in perspective. Yeah. And I think, like you said, just noticing, like, all right, this is something that's kind of triggering for me. Like, I can recognize that. Here's something I can do about it. I can do. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I find that the times when I'm the least happy are when I don't have my voice, or I've given someone else the power to rule over me. Exactly. Yeah. Does that make sense? And I know I'm like, oh my gosh, just by listening to what they were saying and everything, and constantly listening and being like, okay, I have to do what they're saying, I'm giving them my power. Here's the thing. They could be saying something and what they're saying could be totally true. Right. And if my voice, like, if I, with my own power, decide that, oh yeah, that makes sense for me and that's totally true, and I'm making the decision, then I have my power and I'm happy. Yeah. But if I'm listening solely based off of what someone else says, then that kind of pulled my spirit down a little bit. Yeah. And I know we've had conversations about this. Sometimes I feel like, even like the church that we go to, I see people struggle a lot with this, where they're doing things solely based off of what their leaders are saying. And I'm like, hey, I know the leaders are well-intentioned and everything, but you need to make that choice for yourself. Right. Like, it should come from your spirit. If you're just blindly following, you know, a leader who, you know, they say, well, they have like really high responsibilities, they got to be very close to God, I will listen to only what they're saying, instead of you making the choice for yourself, that's giving your power away. Yeah. You know, and I see that happen all the time. And I feel like that's like the cause of so much depression, you know? So it's kind of an interesting thing. Kim, what brings you joy right now? What brings you joy now? I recently just hung out with my niece. She brings me joy. I think just like that childlike
wonder. I don't know. Like she just gets excited about everything, and
Yeah.
and that in turn is exciting. And that brings me joy. Being outside brings me joy.
Yes.
Like, I love Utah in the summer, and we haven't had any fires or anything yet. Crossing our fingers. So like
Mhm.
the air's been great. So just like getting out, being able to like touch the rocks and the trees and that and sometimes honestly just like snuggling in my bed. I have a great bed.
Oh man, I got a purple mattress. That brings me a lot of joy. That brings me a lot of joy. I know. I love it. Like those little comforts are so great, and they're so awesome, and they're so accessible. And the thing that what I love about everything you said is completely free to do.
Yeah.
It's completely free to do.
Well, and I was thinking what we were talking about earlier too. Like I think it's awesome to like go out and like kind of change things up and have these crazy experiences, but sometimes it's really fun to just like in your everyday life be like, how can I make whatever I'm doing the most fun?
Yeah.
I'm doing laundry, like how can I make this so fun? I'm gonna run errands, like, oh man, I love it, it's so great. So that's a mindset I've been trying to try on, because sometimes life can get really monotonous. So
it does, and that's a great way of putting it. Like having fun in the dailiness of life.
Yeah.
Right. How do you make your errands more fun?
I'm weird. I love doing errands, so actually that's not too hard for me. But sometimes even just like cleaning the house, like I don't know, pretending like, okay, I'm gonna set a timer, like I have to get it done by this time, and then I'll like win this award and like blah blah blah.
Yeah,
or, like,
I love it.
Someone's life depends on this. I don't know.
No, it's perfect. You're like Jack Bauer in 24,
right?
And you have
just
to
like
get it all done.
Using your imagination, exactly.
I love that. I sometimes just rocking out to awesome music while I'm doing like daily chores.
Totally
incredible. I love it so much because you're like in a fantasy, and then before you're done, you're like, whoa. The house is cleaned, and I just jammed out. It was amazing. It was so fun.
Right.
And so I love that. Okay. I only have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
So
I'm ready.
Yeah, I think you should be ready. Okay. Now we talked earlier about facing your fears, right? What is your greatest fear right now?
Ooh. I think something that like you say right now, but like this is something that's been like true my entire life, and I'm still working on it, is just feeling inadequate. Feeling like I'm not good enough at something. I really love the feeling of mastery, but it turns out that like we're not good at everything we do the first time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say that's probably my biggest fear.
Yeah. How do you face that those feelings of inadequacy?
I think trying to have more of a growth mindset of like this is a process, and like again, like it doesn't have to be perfect the first time.
Yeah.
I think being in business school was really helpful for that. I was way out of my comfort zone a lot of times, but then you do it and then you realize like, oh, that was scary and I did it and I'm fine.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, just remind myself like, yeah, I have these like fears and concerns, but like, what is the worst thing that can happen?
Right.
Like, and usually it's really not that bad. Or you can use your imagination to make it really bad, but then it doesn't happen and you're like, oh, okay. I'm okay.
Everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thing because that feeling of not being good enough or being inadequate, like that's haunted me for a long time, because you're like, oh my gosh, you want to do your best, you want to do all that you can do. And then I got to this point where I kind of just stopped chasing the goal or whatever, and I realized, you know what, the best I can be is like just going out and having fun. For me is like the key to overcoming all fear. Because for me, when I'm going out and having fun, I let go of the expectation of the outcome, like what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I'm just like, hey, right in here, right now, I'm going to do this. You know that I love tennis. And so I'll give you a tennis analogy, but like I was playing tennis with a coach yesterday, and he just destroys me. It's great. It's fantastic. I love it. I love it so much. But it's so fun playing with him because I can see myself getting better. Do I have any expectation or goals or desires of competing? No, I do not. In fact, for me, tennis, I love as a cardio sport only. Like I just like to go out, hit some balls, and then run around. And then I'm like, hey, I got some good exercise. I got to hang out with my friend, and then I take off. But I've never really been competitive. And so I've never felt this need to like, okay, now I gotta like beat him, or I don't have that type of thing. And so because of that, it's like, hey, just as long as I'm having fun, I'm improving, I feel really good, and I can leave the court being like, that was a great day. I had a really good time, you know? And so it's been a really interesting thing to figure out how to like change my mindset, because once I start doing that, I stop worrying about feeling inadequate, because those feelings don't exist if you're not really trying to like be like, I have to get this goal And if I don't get this goal, I will always feel inadequate.
Yeah.
And what happens is when I'm just kind of focused on having fun, I end up getting those goals anyway.
Right. It's like tempering your expectations or your focus. Like,
yes, it's kind of very interesting. Like, and that happened with my acting career as well. Like, if ever I would be like, I have to book these roles and book these things, I never would book them because I had like this weird, intense energy about it. But I'm like, I'm just gonna have fun, man. I'm just gonna have fun. Like, this is supposed to be a fun process. I'm just gonna have fun with it all. That energy, more often than not, translated into me booking the roles.
Right. Yeah.
It's like
counterintuitive.
It's very counterintuitive. But like the casting directors, they would be like, wow, like this guy just seems like a good time. He just seems like a really good time. And that energy, that's more important than like how good of an actor that person is, you know? And so I ended up like booking more roles because I remember this one audition I had for, oh my gosh, what was the show? I forgot the name of the show. Angie Tribeca, that's what it was, Angie Tribeca. And I went into the casting director's office. And before I went in, I went into like, they had like me sitting in this office, and while I was sitting there were these posters, and one of the posters that they had were for some shows that they had already auditioned for, like, you know, they were the casting directors for, and there was a show that they had done called Gordimer Gibbons. And Gordimer Gibbons, I knew that show well because I knew the main character of that show, and the parents of that show are really good friends of mine. And so when I went into the casting director's office, I'm like, hey, you guys, real quick question. Did you guys cast Gordimer Gibbons? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, I know so-and-so and so-and-so. And for like the first 10, 15 minutes, we didn't even do the audition.
Yeah.
We're just like laughing and joking. I'm like, yeah, I had like this fun memory with them and that fun memory. And they're like, and they were just like dying laughing. They had the best time. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I guess like, yeah, let's do the audition real quick. The audition was super quick. And I'm like, hey, thanks so much. I'm like, no, thank you. Like, that was so fun. I got the part. I totally got the part. And it wasn't because I'm like this amazing actor. I'm sure other actors did really well.
Right.
It's just the energy that was there was just fun and joyous. And I often found that was the key to overcoming inadequacy. Just have fun with it. You know what I mean? Which I think you're already doing. Okay, last question. So knowing what you know now, being a graduate, getting the MBA, you know, getting your MBA, which is amazing. If you could go back in time to the conservative Kim Whatcott, the one that was like told, hey, I can only live like this,
right,
and raise a family and all that stuff, what would you tell her?
Like, there's so much you could do. Like, just start exploring. Just keep your mind open.
Yeah.
Yeah, just try things.
Just try things. I love that. Just try things. It's so perfect. I think if anything if I personally could leave in the podcast would just be, you know, life is freaking magical. And if we go and explore more, you can see the magic of it all. You know, it's awesome. Do you have any last words you'd like to share before we end up?
Oh, I was just thinking maybe more advice I give myself. Like,
I
told you earlier that you shouldn't give people advice. Or just like, there's a lot of things that you can't control. But like, you can control how you respond. And I think like that is something that has helped me like continue to progress in life.
Yeah, I love that.
Amidst like the lemons or things like that.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's exactly it, right? Because we can control our responses, but we can't really control all the outcomes of life.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Kim, you're awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and chatting with me. It was awesome. Like, I love hearing your perspective. And I think that other people out there that are listening can also benefit as well. Do you have anything you'd like to promote or anything like that?
No.
You have nothing you want to promote?
No, I feel like everyone go get outside, go hug your friends. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have any products or anything I'm trying to sell.
No worries. Promote nature, promote God's work. Yeah. You know, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Lemonade Stand podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use to be alerted when we release new episodes. We'd also love to hear your feedback in the reviews, and if you or someone you know has an awesome Lemonade Stand story, please reach out to us on social media and let us know. Thanks so much, and have a great day.